Gideon Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his expansive corner office, gazing out at the bustling city below. His fingers absently traced the cool metal of his wedding band as he pondered the weight of the secret he'd carried for years. At 42, Gideon had built an empire from the ground up. His company, Hayes Innovations, was a tech giant that employed thousands and generated billions in revenue each year. Yet to the world, and more importantly to his wife, he was just a mid-level manager, another cog in the corporate machine. The deception had begun innocently enough. When he'd first met Maricela Finch 5 years ago, Gideon had been captivated by her vibrant personality and infectious laugh. He'd introduced himself simply as Gideon, leaving out the fact that he owned the company hosting the charity gala, where they'd locked eyes across a crowded room. As their relationship deepened, Gideon found himself reluctant to reveal the truth. He'd been burned before by women who saw him as nothing more than a meal ticket. With Maricela, he wanted something real, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not power dynamics or financial motives. So he'd maintained the charade, fabricating a life as a regular working man. He rented a modest apartment, drove an unremarkable sedan, and spun tales of demanding bosses and office politics. All the while, he quietly funneled most of his vast wealth into charitable foundations and reinvested in his company's growth. Gideon's reverie was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. "Come in," he called, turning from the window. His assistant, Lydia, entered with a stack of papers. "The quarterly reports you asked for, Mr. Hayes," she said, placing them on his desk. "Thank you, Lydia," Gideon replied with a warm smile. "And please, how many times do I have to tell you to call me Gideon?" Lydia returned the smile. "At least once more, Mr. Hayes. Will you be heading out soon?" "It's nearly 7. Gideon glanced at his watch, surprised by how late it had gotten. "You're right, I should get going. Maricela will be wondering where I am." He gathered his things, slipping back into the persona of the harried middle manager. "Another late night at the office. You know how it is?" "Of course, sir," Lydia nodded, playing along with the fiction they both knew wasn't true. "Have a good evening." As Gideon made his way to the parking garage, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. Lately, things with Maricela had felt off. Her usual warmth had cooled, replaced by a subtle distance he couldn't quite pin down. He climbed into his Honda Accord, reliable, practical, forgettable, and began the drive home. Traffic crawled along the city streets, giving Gideon ample time to replay recent interactions with his wife in his mind. There was the dinner party last week, where Maricela had barely acknowledged him, instead fawning over some CO she'd just met, and the way she dismissed his ideas for her fledgling interior design business, rolling her eyes as if he couldn't possibly understand such matters. Gideon pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, steeling himself for whatever mood awaited him inside. He found Maricela in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables. "Hey, honey," he said cautiously. "Sorry I'm late. The boss had me working on those projections and, save it," Maricela snapped, not looking up from her task. "I'm sure it was very important." Gideon frowned, taken aback by her tone. "Is everything okay? You seem upset." Maricela slammed the knife down, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes, once warm pools of affection, now glittered with barely contained contempt. "Oh, I'm just peachy," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why wouldn't I be? It's not like I just lost out on the biggest contract of my career, or anything." "What happened?" Gideon asked, genuinely concerned. He knew how much Maricela had been counting on landing the redesign for that new downtown hotel. "What happened," Maricela spat, "is that I got passed over for some hack with connections. Apparently, in this world, talent means nothing if you don't know the right people." Gideon's stomach twisted. He could have easily secured that contract for her with a single phone call, but doing so would have shattered the carefully constructed illusion of their life together. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know how hard you worked on that proposal." Maricela let out a bitter laugh. "Sorry doesn't pay the bills, does it? God, I can't believe I'm stuck here in this mediocrity while people like Alistair Blackwood are out there living the life I deserve." "Alistair Blackwood?" Gideon asked, recognition flaring. Blackwood was one of his company's top executives and a notorious womanizer. Yes, Alastair Blackwood, Maricela said, a dreamy quality entering her voice. Now there's a real man. Successful, powerful, knows how to get things done. Not like some people I could mention. The barb stung, but Gideon kept his expression neutral. I'm sure he worked very hard to get where he is, he said mildly. Maricela snorted. Please. Men like that are born for greatness. They don't settle for being some corporate drone their whole lives. Each word felt like a dagger to Gideon's heart. Had this been building all along? Had Maricela always seen him as somehow less than? He thought back to the early days of their relationship, wondering if he'd missed the signs. I thought you were happy with our life, he said quietly. Happy? Maricela's laugh was harsh and humorless. Happy with what? This tiny house? Your pitiful salary? Watching my dreams slip away while you refuse to even try for a promotion. Gideon's jaw clenched. He'd given her everything she'd ever asked for. Vacations, jewelry, seed money for her business. All while maintaining the illusion of a much more modest lifestyle. And still, it wasn't enough. I provide for us, he said, an edge creeping into his voice. We have a good life. A good life? Maricela's voice rose. This isn't living, Gideon. This is existing. I'm suffocating here. She began to pace, gesticulating wildly. Do you know what Alastair said to me at that networking event last month? He said I had real potential. Someone with my talent and drive shouldn't be wasting away in the suburbs. And he's right. Gideon felt a flare of jealousy, quickly tamped down. He knew Blackwood's reputation. The man collected mistresses like trading cards, using them up and discarding them when he got bored. The thought of him sinking his claws into Maricela made Gideon's blood boil. Alastair Blackwood doesn't know the first thing about you, Gideon said, struggling to keep his tone even. He's just another smooth-talking businessman. Maricela whirled on him, eyes flashing. At least he sees my worth. At least he believes in me. What have you ever done to help my career, huh? When was the last time you introduced me to anyone who could actually make a difference? The irony of her words wasn't lost on Gideon. He could have opened every door for her, paved her path with gold. But he'd wanted her to succeed on her own merits, to know that her accomplishments were hers alone. I've supported you in every way I can, he said, a note of pleading entering his voice. I've always believed in you, Maricela. Supported me? She scoffed. By what? Patting me on the head and telling me to keep trying. That's not support, Gideon. That's placating me like I'm some child with an adorable little hobby. Her words cut deep, but Gideon refused to let it show. He'd faced down corporate raiders and hostile takeovers without flinching. He wouldn't let his wife see how much she was hurting him. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said calmly. What would you have me do? Quit my job? Drain our savings so you can chase after every opportunity that comes along. Maricela's eyes narrowed. There you go again, acting like I'm some flighty dreamer who doesn't know what she's doing. I'm good at what I do, Gideon. I could be great if I just had the chance to prove myself. And you think Alastair Blackwood is going to give you that chance? Gideon couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Men like that don't do anything unless there's something in it for them. Oh, so now you're an expert on successful men? Maricela sneered. That's rich, coming from someone who's been stuck in the same dead-end job for years. Face it, Gideon. You're holding me back. You're holding us both back with your complacency. The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Gideon felt something shift inside him, a hardening of resolve he hadn't known he possessed. I see, he said, his voice deceptively soft. And I suppose you think you'd be better off without me dragging you down? Maricela's silence was answer enough. Gideon nodded slowly, decision crystallizing in his mind. All right then, he said. If that's how you truly feel, maybe it's best if I go. For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across Maricela's face. What are you talking about? You're clearly unhappy, Gideon said, his tone maddeningly calm. You think I'm holding you back from the life you deserve. So I'll remove myself from the equation. He turned and walked to the hall closet, retrieving a small duffel bag he kept packed for business trips. Maricela followed, her anger giving way to confusion. Gideon, "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "Where are you going to go?" "I'm sure I'll figure something out," he replied, not meeting her gaze as he gathered a few essentials. "Maybe I'll crash with a co-worker for a while." Maricella's composure cracked. "You can't just leave," she said, a note of panic creeping into her voice. "We need to talk about this." Gideon paused at the front door, finally turning to face her. "I think you've said everything you needed to say," he said quietly. "You made it very clear how you see me, Maricela. As a fool, as less than a man, as someone holding you back from greatness." He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "So I'm going to do what any good husband would do. I'm going to get out of your way and let you chase that greatness you're so sure is waiting for you." "Gideon, wait," Maricela started, reaching for him, but Gideon was already stepping through the door. "Goodbye, Maricela," he said softly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." And with that, he walked out into the cool night air, leaving his stunned wife staring after him. As Gideon drove through the darkened streets, his mind raced. He'd acted on impulse, letting years of pent-up frustration and hurt guide his actions. Now, faced with the reality of what he'd done, he felt a strange mix of emotions washing over him. There was anger, certainly, anger at Maricela for her casual cruelty, for the way she'd dismissed everything they'd built together. But there was also a sense of relief, as if a weight he hadn't even known he was carrying had been lifted from his shoulders. For years, he'd shaped his entire life around maintaining this illusion for Maricela. He'd hidden his true self, his accomplishments, his very essence, all in the name of love. And for what? To be treated like a failure? To be compared unfavorably to men who weren't fit to shine his shoes? Gideon's hands tightened on the steering wheel as a new emotion bubbled to the surface. Determination. He was done playing the fool, done pretending to be less than he was. He pulled into the underground parking garage of his office building, nodding to the night security guard as he made his way to the executive elevator. In moments, he was back in his top-floor sanctuary, gazing out at the glittering cityscape. This was who he truly was. Gideon Hayes, CEO and founder of Hayes Innovations. A man of power, of vision, of unwavering resolve. It was time the world and Maricela saw him for who he really was. But not yet. No, first he would watch. He would see just how his darling wife handled life without his silent support propping her up. He would let her experience the harsh realities of the world she so desperately wanted to be a part of. And when she'd learned her lesson, when she'd tasted the bitter dregs of failure and betrayal, only then would he reveal the truth. Only then would Maricela understand exactly what she'd thrown away. Gideon's reflection stared back at him from the window, hard and unforgiving. The time for playing games was over. Now, the real Gideon Hayes would show himself. And heaven help anyone who stood in his way. The first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds of Gideon's office, where he had spent the night. He rubbed his eyes, the events of the previous evening still raw in his mind. His phone buzzed incessantly with 37 missed calls from Maricela. He ignored them all. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Lydia entered, surprise evident on her face. "Mr. Hayes? I didn't expect to see you here so early." Gideon straightened his tie. "Lydia, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few days. Something's come up?" Lydia nodded, concern creasing her brow. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "It will be," Gideon replied, his voice hard. "I also need you to keep an eye on Maricela's business dealings." "Discreetly, sir?" Lydia's eyebrows shot up. Gideon's lips tightened into a thin line. "My wife seems to think she doesn't need me. I'm inclined to let her prove it." Lydia hesitated. "Mr. Hayes, are you sure that's wise?" "Wise?" Gideon laughed bitterly. "Probably not, but it's necessary. She wants to play in the big leagues. Fine. Let's see how she handles it without me clearing the path." As Lydia left to carry out his instructions, Gideon turned his attention to his computer. With a few keystrokes, he accessed Maricela's business records. Her interior design firm, while modestly successful, had been propped up by his silent investments and connections. Time to see how it fared without that safety net. Hours passed as Gideon methodically dismantled the support structure he'd built around Maricela's career. Calls were made, deals subtly influenced, strings quietly cut. All the while, his phone continued to buzz with her increasingly frantic messages. Finally, he picked up. "Gideon?" Maricella's voice was thick with tears. "Where are you? Please come home. We need to talk about this." "Do we?" Gideon's tone was ice. "I thought you made yourself perfectly clear last night." "I didn't mean," she started, but Gideon cut her off. "Yes, you did. You meant every word." "Well, congratulations, Maricela. You're free of the dead weight now. Enjoy your shot at greatness." He ended the call, ignoring the pang in his chest at her choked sob. Gideon Hayes didn't get where he was by being soft. He'd given Maricela his heart, and she'd thrown it back in his face. Now she'd learned the consequences. Days turned into weeks. Gideon threw himself into work, expanding the company's reach and influence. All the while, he kept a watchful eye on Maricela's floundering attempts to keep her business afloat. One afternoon, Lydia entered his office, a concerned look on her face. "Sir, there's something you should know," she said, handing him a tablet. "It's about Mrs. Hayes." Gideon scanned the screen, his jaw clenching. It was a gossip column, featuring a photo of Maricela on the arm of none other than Alistair Blackwood. "Well," Gideon said, his voice dangerously calm, "it seems my wife has found herself a new patron." Lydia shifted uncomfortably. "There's more, sir. Mr. Blackwood has been asking questions about you. Discreet inquiries about your position in the company." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Has he now? Interesting. Thank you, Lydia. That will be all." Alone again, Gideon pondered this new development. Blackwood was ambitious, always looking for an angle. And Maricela, well, she'd made her priorities clear. His phone rang Maricela again. This time he answered. "What is it?" he asked coldly. "Gideon, please." Maricela's voice was desperate. "I need your help. The Rothwell account they're threatening to pull out. If I lose this deal, I'll be ruined." Gideon's laugh was without humor. "Funny how quickly greatness turns to ruin, isn't it? What happened to all those powerful connections you were so proud of?" "I was wrong, okay?" Maricela cried. "I said terrible things. But please, Gideon, I can't do this without you." For a moment, Gideon was tempted. But then he remembered her sneering face, her casual cruelty. His resolve hardened. "Yes, you can," he said flatly. "You wanted this, Maricela. The big leagues, remember? Well, here they are. Sink or swim." He hung up, ignoring the twinge of guilt. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. Weeks passed. Gideon watched from afar as Maricela's world crumbled. Her business teetered on the brink of bankruptcy. The society pages, once full of glowing praise for the up-and-coming designer, now whispered about her fall from grace. And through it all, there was Alistair Blackwood, circling like a shark, scenting blood in the water. One evening, as Gideon was preparing to leave the office, his private line rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Hayes," a smooth voice purred. "Alistair Blackwood here. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Gideon's grip tightened on the phone. "Not at all, Mr. Blackwood. What can I do for you?" "Oh, I think it's more a question of what I can do for you," Blackwood replied. "I've recently become acquainted with your charming wife. She speaks very highly of you." "Does she now?" Gideon's voice was neutral. "How interesting." Blackwood chuckled. "Indeed. She seems to be under the impression that you're some sort of hidden asset within Hayes Innovations. I must say, I'm intrigued." Gideon's mind raced. So Maricela had been fishing for information, trying to leverage their relationship, no doubt. "Mr. Blackwood," Gideon said carefully, "I'm not sure what my wife has told you, but I can assure you, I'm just a mid-level manager. Nothing more." "Come now, Mr. Hayes." Blackwood's tone was silky. "We both know that's not true. I've done my homework. The way capital moves within your division, the whispers of your influence. You're far more than you appear, aren't you?" Gideon remained silent, weighing his options. Blackwood pressed on. "I have a proposition for you, Mr. Hayes. One that could be mutually beneficial. Why don't we meet for dinner? Say, tomorrow night at Le Bernardin? We can discuss your future with the company." "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Blackwood," Gideon replied coolly. "But I'm quite satisfied with my current position. Blackwood's laugh was sharp. Are you? Well, perhaps your lovely wife might be interested in discussing her future then. She seems quite amenable to new opportunities. The threat was thinly veiled. Gideon's blood boiled, but he kept his voice level. My wife's business dealings are her own concern, Mr. Blackwood. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to attend to. He hung up before Blackwood could respond, his mind whirling. So this was Maricella's game. Feed Blackwood information, real or imagined, in hopes of securing her own position. And Blackwood, ever the opportunist, was looking to exploit it. Gideon's jaw clenched. He'd let this go on long enough. It was time to end the charade. The next morning, he called Lydia into his office. I need you to arrange a meeting, he said. Alistair Blackwood, Maricela, and myself, here in my office. This afternoon. Lydia's eyes widened. Are you sure about this, Mr. Hayes? Gideon nodded grimly. It's time to show my hand. Make it happen. Hours later, Gideon stood at the window of his office, watching as a sleek black car pulled up to the building. Maricela emerged, looking haggard and nervous. Blackwood followed, his shark-like grin visible even from this distance. Gideon took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Hayes, Lydia's voice came through. They're here. Send them in, Gideon replied, not turning from the window. The door opened. He heard Maricela's sharp intake of breath, could practically feel Blackwood's predatory gaze sweeping the opulent office. Gideon? Maricela's voice was small, confused. What's going on? Why are we here? Slowly, Gideon turned to face them. Gone was the mild-mannered facade he'd worn for so long. In its place stood the titan of industry, the man who'd built an empire from nothing. Welcome, he said, his voice hard as steel. I believe it's time we had a talk. Blackwood recovered first, his smile never wavering. Mr. Hayes, this is unexpected. I must say, you've been holding out on us. Maricela's eyes darted between the two men, realization slowly dawning. Gideon? I don't understand. This office. Are you the CEO and founder of Hayes Innovations? Gideon finished for her. Yes, Maricela. I am. The color drained from Maricela's face. But all this time, why didn't you tell me? Gideon's laugh was bitter. Why? Because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I could give you. Clearly, I was mistaken. Blackwood stepped forward, ever the opportunist. Now, let's not be hasty. I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement that benefits all parties. Gideon's gaze snapped to him. The only arrangement you need to concern yourself with, Mr. Blackwood, is your severance package. As of this moment, you're no longer employed by Hayes Innovations. Blackwood's smile faltered. You can't do that. The board answers to me. Gideon cut him off. And they'll be very interested to hear about your attempts to manipulate company information for personal gain. Blackwood's face hardened. Now see here, Hayes. No, you see here. Gideon's voice was like thunder. You try to play me, Blackwood. You and Maricela both. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't have contingencies in place? He pressed a button on his desk, and a holographic display flickered to life, showing emails, phone records, financial transactions. Every move you've made, every deal you've tried to orchestrate behind my back, I've known about it all. And now, you're going to leave. Both of you. Maricela stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Gideon, please. I didn't know. I never meant save it. Gideon snapped. You made your choices, Maricela. You showed me exactly who you are and what you value. Now you get to live with the consequences. Blackwood, seeing the writing on the wall, straightened his tie. Well, it seems I've overstayed my welcome. Mrs. Hayes, I believe this concludes our business relationship as well. Good day. With that, he strode out of the office, leaving Maricela alone with Gideon. For a long moment, silence reigned. Maricela stared at Gideon, her face a mask of shock and dawning horror. All this time, she whispered, you were? And I? Yes, Gideon said coldly. All this time, I gave you everything, Maricela. A comfortable life, opportunities most people only dream of. And it still wasn't enough for you. Maricela's tears fell freely now. I'm sorry. God, Gideon, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. That's right. Gideon cut her off. You didn't realize. You were so busy chasing some imagined greatness that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. A taste of the high life, the big leagues. How does it feel? Maricella's shoulders slumped in defeat. Please, Gideon. I know I made a terrible mistake. But I love you. We can fix this, can't we? For a moment, Gideon felt a flicker of the old warmth. But then he remembered her cruel words, her disdain, her betrayal. His heart hardened once more. No, Maricela. We can't. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. He turned back to the window, effectively dismissing her. You'll be hearing from my lawyers regarding the divorce proceedings. Goodbye, Maricela. He heard her choked sob, the rustle of her clothes as she moved towards the door. For a second, she paused. I really did love you, Gideon, she said softly. Gideon didn't turn around. No, Maricela. You love the idea of me. The man you thought you could mold into your stepping stone to success. That man never existed. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Gideon alone with his thoughts and the weight of all that had transpired. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across his office, Gideon Hayes stood at the precipice of a new chapter in his life. The lies were over. The facade had crumbled. For better or worse, he was finally, truly himself. And as he gazed out at the empire he'd built, Gideon made a silent vow. Never again would he hide who he was. Never again would he let someone make him feel less than. The world had seen a glimpse of the real Gideon Hayes today. Tomorrow, they'd see so much more. The weeks following the confrontation in Gideon's office passed in a blur of activity. The business world buzzed with the revelation of Hayes Innovation's true CEO, and Gideon found himself thrust into the spotlight he'd avoided for so long. One morning, as he reviewed the latest financial reports, Lydia entered his office with a concerned expression. Mr. Hayes, there's something you should see, she said, handing him a tablet. Gideon's eyes narrowed as he scanned the screen. It was an article about Maricela, detailing her spectacular fall from grace. Her design firm had collapsed, her social circle had abandoned her, and she was facing multiple lawsuits from angry clients. Well, Gideon said, his voice cold, it seems the house of cards has finally fallen. Lydia hesitated. Sir, there's more. Mrs. Hayes. Maricela. She's been trying to reach you. She's left messages with reception, saying it's urgent. Gideon's jaw clenched. I'm not interested in anything she has to say, Lydia. Make sure reception knows to block her calls. Of course, Mr. Hayes. Lydia nodded, but concern lingered in her eyes. Is there anything else you need? Gideon waved her away, turning his attention back to his work. He refused to let thoughts of Maricela distract him. She'd made her bed, and now she was lying in it. Days passed, and Gideon threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. He attended board meetings, negotiated deals, and steered the company towards even greater success. But despite his best efforts, a nagging emptiness persisted. One evening, as he was preparing to leave the office, his private line rang. The number was unfamiliar. Gideon Hayes, he answered brusquely. Mr. Hayes, a smooth, feminine voice replied. This is Rhea Lawson from the Children's Hope Foundation. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Gideon's brow furrowed. The Children's Hope Foundation was one of the charities he supported anonymously. Not at all, Ms. Lawson. What can I do for you? Well, Mr. Hayes, Rhea continued, I'm calling to thank you for your generous donation. It's made a world of difference to our programs. I was hoping we could meet to discuss how we're putting the funds to use and perhaps explore ways to expand our partnership. Gideon hesitated. He usually avoided direct contact with the charities he supported, preferring to work through intermediaries. But something in Rhea's voice intrigued him. I suppose it could be arranged, he said finally. How about lunch tomorrow? There's a little bistro near my office. That sounds perfect, Rhea replied, a smile evident in her voice. I look forward to meeting you, Mr. Hayes. The next day, Gideon found himself seated across from Rhea Lawson in a cozy corner of the bistro. She was not what he expected, no power suit or polished pitch. Instead, She wore a simple sundress and a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "I can't thank you enough for meeting with me. The work we've been able to do thanks to your support is truly remarkable." Gideon nodded, feeling slightly off balance. "I'm glad to hear it, Ms. Lawson. Though I must admit, I usually prefer to keep my philanthropic efforts low-key." Ria's smile widened. "Oh, I'm well aware of that, Mr. Hayes. Your reputation for anonymous giving is well known in my circles. That's part of why I wanted to meet you in person." She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with passion. "You see, it's not just about the money. It's about the impact. And I believe that with your influence, we could do so much more." For the next hour, Ria outlined her vision for expanding the foundation's reach. She spoke of after-school programs in underprivileged areas, mentorship opportunities, and scholarships for promising students. Gideon found himself drawn in by her enthusiasm and genuine commitment. It was refreshing to talk to someone who seemed to care about more than just climbing the social ladder or making profitable connections. As their meeting drew to a close, Gideon made a decision. "Ms. Lawson," he said, "I'm impressed by your dedication. I'd like to arrange a tour of some of your facilities if that's possible." Ria's face lit up. "Of course. I'd be delighted to show you firsthand the difference we're making. And please call me Ria." Gideon felt the corners of his mouth tugging upwards. "Ria it is then, and you can call me Gideon." Over the next few weeks, Gideon found himself spending more and more time with Ria. They toured community centers, visited schools, and discussed ways to expand the foundation's impact. Her passion was infectious, and Gideon felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: genuine connection. One evening, as they walked through a park after a particularly successful fundraising event, Ria turned to him with a curious expression. "Gideon," she said softly, "can I ask you something personal?" He tensed slightly, but nodded. "Go ahead. Why do you do all this?" She gestured vaguely. "The anonymous donations, the behind-the-scenes support. You could be using your wealth and influence to boost your public image, but instead, you hide it. Why?" Gideon was silent for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "I suppose," he said finally, "it's because I wanted to know that people appreciated me for who I am, not what I have." He laughed bitterly. "Fat lot of good that did me in the end." Ria's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Gideon sighed, then found himself telling her everything about Maricela, the deception, the betrayal. To his surprise, it felt good to finally unburden himself. When he finished, Ria was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "Gideon, I'm so sorry you went through that. But you should know the man I've gotten to know these past weeks. He's pretty amazing, billions or no billions." Gideon felt a warmth spreading through his chest at her words. For the first time in months, he smiled a real, genuine smile. Their relationship deepened over the following weeks. Gideon found himself opening up more, letting down the walls he'd built around his heart. Ria was unlike anyone he'd ever known, kind, genuine, and completely unimpressed by his wealth or status. One afternoon, as they were leaving a board meeting for the foundation, Gideon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and froze. It was Maricela. Ria noticed his reaction. "Everything okay?" Gideon hesitated, then showed her the phone. "It's my ex-wife. She's been trying to reach me for weeks." Ria's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Maybe it's time you heard what she has to say. For closure, if nothing else." Gideon nodded slowly. "You're right. I should face this." He answered the call. "Maricela." "Gideon." Her voice was frantic. "Thank God you finally answered. I need your help. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." Gideon's jaw clenched. "What do you want, Maricela? Can we meet? Please? I know I have no right to ask, but I'm desperate." Gideon glanced at Ria, who nodded encouragingly. He sighed. "Fine. My office. 1 hour." An hour later, Gideon sat behind his desk, Ria by his side, as Maricela was shown in. She looked a far cry from the polished socialite she'd once been. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Gideon," she began, then faltered as she noticed Ria. Who's this?" "This is Ria," Gideon said firmly. "She's with me." "Now, what do you want, Maricela?" Maricella's eyes darted between them, a flicker of jealousy crossing her face before desperation took over. I need your help, Gideon. The lawsuits, the debts, I'm drowning. If you could just talk to some people, pull some strings. No, Gideon cut her off, his voice hard. I won't do that, Maricela. Your actions, your choices, they're yours to deal with. Maricella's face crumpled. Please, Gideon. I know I hurt you, but we had something once. Doesn't that mean anything? Gideon felt Rhea's hand on his arm, a silent source of support. He took a deep breath. It did mean something, Maricela, but you destroyed that. You showed me exactly who you are and what you value. I won't be your safety net anymore. Tears streamed down Maricela's face. What am I supposed to do? You'll do what everyone else does, Gideon replied, his tone softening slightly. You'll pick yourself up and start over. Build something real this time, not just a facade. Maricela looked at him pleadingly. And us? Is there any chance? Gideon shook his head. No, Maricela. That chapter of our lives is closed. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same. With a choked sob, Maricela turned and fled the office. Gideon let out a long breath, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Rhea squeezed his hand. You okay? Gideon nodded, looking at her with newfound clarity. Yeah, I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am. In the months that followed, Gideon's life transformed. He stepped fully into his role as the public face of Hayes Innovations, no longer hiding behind a facade. The company flourished under his open leadership, and his philanthropic efforts expanded, making a real difference in countless lives. But the biggest change was in his personal life. His relationship with Rhea deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. She challenged him, supported him, and most importantly, saw him for who he truly was. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the park where they'd had their first real conversation, Gideon turned to Rhea. You know, he said softly, I used to think that keeping my wealth a secret was the only way to find someone who loved me for me. But I was wrong. It wasn't about the money at all. It was about finding someone who values the same things I do, who pushes me to be better. Rhea smiled up at him. And have you found that someone? Gideon's answer was a kiss, soft and full of promise. As they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I think I have. If she'll have me. Rhea's laugh was like music. Oh, I think that could be arranged. As they continued their walk, Gideon reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The pain of Maricela's betrayal, the loneliness of his self-imposed isolation, it had all led him here, to a place where he could finally be himself, wholly and without reservation. He thought of Maricela briefly, hoping she'd find her way. But that was no longer his concern. His future lay ahead, bright with possibility, with a woman who saw his true worth not in his bank account or his business acumen, but in the strength of his character and the depth of his heart. Gideon Hayes, the man who had hidden in plain sight for so long, was finally stepping into the light, and he found that it was warmer and brighter than he'd ever imagined. The air conditioner hummed with monotonous precision in courtroom 4B, but it did nothing to dispel the tension hanging between the opposing tables. Callan Week sat with his back straight, jaw set, hands folded neatly on the polished oak surface before him. At 41, his dark hair had begun to gray at the temples, not from age, but from the 18 months of calculated stress that had led to this moment. Across the aisle, Lena Von Week reclined in her chair with practiced nonchalance. Her crimson blazer stood out against the courtroom's muted colors like a declaration of war. At 36, she remained as breathtaking as the day Callan had met her physically, at least. Whatever beauty he'd once seen beneath the surface had withered away, replaced by something cold and calculating. Beside her sat Sebastian Crowley, her attorney. The man's $1,000 suit and manicured nails screamed of privilege that hadn't been earned but inherited. His smirk as he shuffled through documents made Callan's stomach turn, but he kept his expression neutral. Your Honor, Sebastian said, rising to his feet with theatrical confidence. As we've outlined in our filings, Mrs. Von Week is entitled to half of all marital assets, including the business Mr. Week built during their marriage. The prenuptial agreement was signed under duress and should be considered null and void. Judge Eleanor Barnes, a woman whose 30 years on the bench had left her face creased with permanent skepticism, peered over her reading glasses. Mr. Crowley, we've heard your arguments at length. What I haven't heard is substantive evidence of this alleged duress. Sebastian's confidence didn't waver. Your Honor, my client was vulnerable because she was in love. Judge Barnes interrupted. Raising an eyebrow, a few quiet chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Callan didn't join them. He hadn't come here for entertainment. Sebastian cleared his throat. Mrs. Von Week sacrificed her own career prospects to support her husband's business ventures. She was instrumental in spending my money, Callan muttered, just loud enough for his own attorney to hear. Ronan Baxter, a man whose silver hair and piercing gaze had intimidated opponents for 3 decades, placed a steadying hand on Callan's arm. Patience, he whispered. It's almost time. Across the aisle, Lena leaned toward Sebastian, whispering something that made him smile. She caught Callan's eye and held his gaze, her lips curving into a smirk. You should smile more, Callan, she called across the divide. It's just money, after all. The gallery murmured at the provocation. Judge Barnes rapped her gavel once. Mrs. Von Week, address the court, not your spouse. Sebastian straightened his tie. As I was saying, Your Honor, my client is entitled to half of everything, including the Week Enterprises holdings valued at approximately $12 million, the primary residence valued at $2.5 million, and various investments and assets totaling another $3 million. Lena's eyes gleamed at the numbers. We're also requesting exclusive rights to the vacation property in Aspen and both vehicles, given that Mr. Week has the means to replace them easily through his business connections. Judge Barnes made a note, then glanced at Ronan. Mr. Baxter, your response? Ronan rose slowly, deliberately, a man who knew the power of a well-timed pause. Your Honor, we have sat quietly through Mr. Crowley's creative interpretation of both the law and the facts. Now, we would like to present evidence that renders these proceedings moot. Sebastian scoffed. Your Honor, if they had exonerating evidence, they would have presented it during discovery. This evidence, Ronan continued, unruffled, came into our possession only yesterday evening. It directly pertains to matters of legal ethics that impact these proceedings. Judge Barnes frowned. Approach the bench, both of you. As the attorneys moved forward, Callan caught Lena's eye again. Gone was the smirk, replaced by the first flicker of uncertainty. Good. He wanted her to feel it, that first inkling that perhaps she'd miscalculated. After a heated, whispered exchange that Callan couldn't hear, Judge Barnes nodded. I'll allow it. Mr. Week, would you like to address the court? Callan stood, buttoning his jacket as he did so. He moved to the center of the courtroom with measured steps. Your Honor, for the past year and a half, I have watched as my wife attempted to dismantle everything I've built. Today, I'd like to submit this as evidence. He turned to Ronan, who handed him a thick manila envelope. Callan approached the bench and placed it before the judge with steady hands. Judge Barnes opened it, her expression unchanging as she began to read. But as her eyes moved down the page, her brow furrowed. She looked up, first at Callan, then at Lena and Sebastian. Mr. Crowley, are you aware of the contents of this document? Sebastian shifted in his seat. I haven't had the opportunity to review it, Your Honor. Then perhaps you should. She handed the first page to the bailiff, who delivered it to Sebastian. As he read, the color drained from his face. He shot a panicked glance at Lena, who grabbed the paper from his hands. Her reaction was everything Callan had imagined during countless sleepless nights. The widening of the eyes, the parting of lips, the sudden, violent shaking of her head. This is fabricated, she stammered. He's lying. The enclosed photographs and financial records suggest otherwise, Mrs. Von Week, Judge Barnes said, her voice cold. Mr. Baxter, what exactly are you requesting in light of this evidence? Ronan stepped forward. Given the demonstrated fraud and misconduct, we request immediate dismissal of Mrs. Von Week's claims and enforcement of the prenuptial agreement as written. Judge Barnes nodded slowly. I'm going to call a 1-hour recess to review these materials fully. When we reconvene, I expect both parties to be prepared to address these allegations specifically. As she rose, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Lena lunged toward Callan, her composure shattered. "What have you done?" she hissed, her face contorted with rage. Callan stepped back, maintaining his distance. "I didn't do anything, Lena. You did this to yourself." Sebastian grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Not here," he warned. "We need to talk. Now." As they hurried from the courtroom, Callan allowed himself the smallest smile. Phase 1 was complete. Ronan gathered his papers. "That went well," he said quietly. "But don't celebrate yet. Barnes is thorough. She'll want to verify everything." "Everything's legitimate," Callan assured him. "Every signature, every transfer, every photograph." Ronan nodded. "Then let's get some coffee. This is going to be a long day." As they walked through the courthouse corridor, Callan felt lighter than he had in months. The reckoning had begun, and when it ended, Lena Von Week would have nothing but regrets. 6 months earlier, Callan sat in his home office, the glow of his monitor the only illumination in the darkened room. It was past midnight, the third consecutive night he'd worked until the early hours. Not because weak enterprises demanded it, but because going to bed meant lying next to Lena, and that had become its own form of torture. The spreadsheet before him tallied assets, accounts, properties, a comprehensive map of the life he'd built. A life that, until recently, he'd thought was shared. The first signs had been subtle. Dinner conversations that fell flat. The way Lena's phone would flip face down whenever he entered a room. Weekend plans that increasingly didn't include him. Working late again, Lena's voice came from the doorway, startling him. Callan minimized the spreadsheet. "Just finishing up," he said, not turning to look at her. She moved behind him, hands resting on his shoulders. Once, her touch had brought comfort. Now, he had to resist the urge to shrug it off. "You've been distant lately," she said, her tone casual but probing. "Have I?" Callan finally turned, meeting her gaze. "I could say the same about you." Lena's expression remained neutral, but her hands slipped from his shoulders. "I've been busy. The Foundation's annual gala is being planned by the event coordinator you hired specifically so you wouldn't have to handle the details," Callan finished. "Try again." A flash of irritation crossed her features before she masked it with a smile. "Are you keeping tabs on me now? Should I be?" She laughed, the sound hollow. "Don't be paranoid, Cal. It doesn't suit you." She leaned against his desk, arms folded. "Maybe we both need a break. I've been thinking about spending a few days at the lake house." "Alone?" Callan asked, watching her carefully. "I need some space to think." She shrugged. "We both do." Callan nodded slowly. "When?" "This weekend. I'll leave Friday morning." He turned back to his computer, reopening the spreadsheet. "All right. I hope you find what you're looking for." She hesitated, perhaps expecting an argument, then left without another word. The scent of her perfume lingered, jasmine and something sharper beneath. New, unfamiliar. Callan reached for his phone and typed a message to his sister. "She's making a move." Friday. Lake House. The response came seconds later. "Tracker placed. Camera installed." "Will monitor," but he closed his eyes, fighting the wave of nausea that came with such calculations. When had his marriage become a tactical operation? The answer lay scattered through a string of betrayals. The credit card statements with charges from hotels they'd never visited together. The late-night calls she'd explain away as work emergencies for her charitable foundation, calls that never seemed to come when he was out of earshot. And then, 3 weeks ago, the confirmation he hadn't wanted but needed, a text mistakenly sent to him instead of the intended recipient. He suspects nothing. "We're still on for Thursday." He'd confronted her that night, phone in hand, eyes burning with the question he couldn't bring himself to ask directly. "Wrong number," she'd said with a dismissive laugh. "One of the board members for the foundation. We're meeting to discuss funding allocations." A perfectly reasonable explanation, except that Callan had checked there had been no foundation meeting that Thursday. When he'd pointed this out, Lena's demeanor had shifted. "Are you checking up on me?" she demanded, outrage replacing nonchalance. "Going through my phone? Calling my colleagues." The argument that followed became about his lack of trust, his controlling behavior, his paranoia, everything except the truth. By its end, he'd found himself apologizing, promising to do better, to trust more. That night, as Lena slept beside him, Callan had realized a fundamental truth. The woman he'd married didn't exist. Perhaps she never had. The next morning, he'd called Ronan Baxter, his attorney, and the closest thing he had to a friend. Now, as the clock on his monitor ticked past 1 a.m., Callan opened a new document and began to type. At the top, he wrote a single title: Contingency Plan. If Lena was playing a game, he would play it better. If she wanted a war, he would give her one. But unlike her, he wouldn't underestimate his opponent. By dawn, the plan was outlined. By the end of the week, as Lena headed to the lake house for her thinking time, the first pieces would be in motion. Throughout the day on Friday, as he sat in meetings and reviewed contracts, his phone buzzed with updates from Harlow, his sister. She arrived at 11:30. Not alone, male companion. Taking photos now, an hour later. It's him, the lawyer, Sebastian Crowley. They're definitely not discussing legal matters. By evening, Callan had a folder of images that turned his stomach but steeled his resolve. His wife and her attorney, caught in embraces that obliterated any pretense of professional boundaries. That on Sunday night, when Lena returned home with a forced smile and vague stories about clearing her head, Callan greeted her with equal pretense. "Feel better?" he asked, pouring her a glass of the wine she preferred. "Much," she said, accepting the glass. "Sometimes you just need to step away from everything, you know?" "I do." He clinked his glass against hers. "To clear heads." Her smile faltered just slightly, uncertainty flickering behind her eyes. "To clear heads," she echoed. They sipped in silence, two liars marking their territory with half-truths. But only one of them knew that the endgame had already begun. The following Wednesday, Callan returned from a business lunch to find an envelope on his desk. Inside, divorce papers. The petition claimed irreconcilable differences, but included a proposed settlement that was anything but standard. She wanted everything: the house, the cars, the vacation properties, and most damagingly, a 50% stake in weak enterprises. That night, when he confronted her, Lena didn't bother with pretense. "It's been over for years, Callan," she said, arms folded as she stood in their bedroom doorway. "We both know it." "And the settlement?" he asked, holding up the paperwork. "You think you're entitled to half my company? A company you've never worked a day for?" She smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "I'm entitled to half of everything we built during our marriage. That's the law." Callan laughed, a bitter sound. "What exactly did you contribute, Lena, besides spending the money I earned?" Her expression hardened. "I stood by you. I played the perfect wife at every business dinner, every client meeting. I built relationships that helped secure deals. That's a fantasy, and you know it." Callan shook his head. "You attended events when it suited you, talked to people you found interesting, and left early when you got bored. Believe what you want." She shrugged. "The courts will see it differently. Women like me, who sacrificed their own careers to support their husbands, were sympathetic figures, especially when those husbands spend more time at the office than at home." The calculation in her voice chilled him. This wasn't a recent decision. This was a plan, long in the making. "How long have you been working with Sebastian?" he asked quietly. That a flicker of surprise crossed her face before she controlled it. "He's a brilliant attorney with an excellent track record in high-asset divorces." "That's not what I asked." She smiled thinly. "Be careful, Callan. False accusations against my legal counsel won't play well in court." "I'm not the one who needs to be careful," he replied, matching her tone. "You've made a critical error, Lena." "And what's that?" "You think you know me." He placed the divorce papers on the nightstand. "You don't." That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, he moved into a downtown apartment he'd quietly purchased 3 weeks earlier, an address not even Lena knew about. From there, the real work began. The office of Baxter Legal occupied the entire 38th floor of the glass tower that dominated the downtown skyline. Callan sat across from Ronan in the conference room, walls of windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. On the table between them lay spread the documents that would redefine Callan's future. Have you considered a less aggressive approach? Ronan asked, leaning back in his chair. Divorce is painful enough without turning it into all-out warfare. Callan's gaze remained fixed on the papers. She fired the first shot. She chose Sebastian Crowley, a man known for scorched earth tactics. She's sleeping with him, using him to manipulate the legal system. He looked up. Do you honestly believe she'll settle for anything less than my complete destruction? Ronan sighed. No. From what you've shown me, she wants blood. Then we need to be prepared to draw it first. Callan slid a folder across the table. I've already begun implementing certain safeguards. Ronan raised an eyebrow as he opened the folder. His expression remained neutral as he read, but Callan noted the slight tightening around his eyes, surprise, or perhaps concern. This is aggressive, Ronan said finally, closing the folder. But legal, if executed correctly. It will be. Callan leaned forward. I've spent my life building systems that anticipate problems before they arise. This is no different, except the problem isn't a market fluctuation or a supply chain disruption. It's your wife. Ronan's voice softened. Callan, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once set in motion. She's been planning this for at least a year, Callan interrupted. Maybe longer. The foundation she insisted on starting? Its accounts are structured to hide transfers to personal holdings she established in the Caymans. The art collection she's been curating for our home, purchased in her name only, despite using our joint funds. Ronan frowned. How do you know this? I hired investigators the day after I saw that text message. Then I started looking myself. Banking records, property transfers, unusual patterns in our expenses. Callan's mouth twisted into a grim smile. She's good, but she's careless. Arrogant. She doesn't think I'd notice, or that if I did, I wouldn't understand what I was seeing. But you did. Numbers don't lie, Ronan. People do. Ronan nodded slowly. All right, if you're certain this is the path you want to take, I'll help you navigate it. But you realize that what you're proposing, these asset transfers, the restructuring, it needs to happen quickly. And it needs to be airtight. I've already begun. Callan pulled out his phone, opened an app, and slid it across the table. The house has been placed in an irrevocable trust with my niece as the beneficiary. The trust was created 3 years ago as part of legitimate estate planning. Lena even signed the paperwork, though I doubt she read it. Ronan examined the documents on the phone. And Weak Enterprises? My sister Harlow has always been a silent partner. She provided initial funding when I started the company. On paper, I've only ever owned 49%. The remaining 51% was held in a holding company that, as of yesterday, transferred full ownership to Harlow. She agreed to this. She suggested it. Callan's expression softened briefly. Harlow understands what loyalty means. And your liquid assets? Legally moved to offshore accounts that predate my marriage to Lena. Again, part of estate planning she never bothered to understand. Ronan handed the phone back. You've been thorough. But Lena's team will fight this. They'll claim these transfers were made to defraud her of marital assets. Let them try. Callan's voice hardened. Every transaction is supported by documentation backdated appropriately. Every signature is authentic. Every transfer follows patterns established years ago. And the photographs? The evidence of her affair with Crowley continuing to accumulate. They're not particularly discreet. Callan's lip curled in disgust. Besides the lake house, they've met at the Harbor View Hotel twice and his condo downtown at least weekly. I have time-stamped photos, hotel receipts, even audio in some cases. Ronan leaned forward, his expression grave. Callan, listen to me carefully. What we're doing walks a fine legal line. It's legitimate asset protection, but only if executed precisely. One misstep and you could face serious consequences. I understand the risks. Do you? Because from where I sit, this looks less like legal strategy and more like justice, Callan finished. This is about justice, Ronan. She betrayed our vows. She betrayed basic decency. She's trying to steal what I've spent my life building. His voice remained calm, but his hands had curled into fists. I won't let her win. Not this time. Ronan studied him for a long moment. This isn't just about the money or the business, is it? Callan's jaw tightened. What else would it be about? You loved her once. The words hung in the air between them, a truth Callan had tried to bury beneath spreadsheets and legal maneuvers. Yes, he admitted finally. I did. But love without respect is worthless. Love without honesty is a lie. He straightened in his chair. I'm not doing this because I loved her. I'm doing it because she thought she could use that love against me. Ronan nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. Then let's proceed. I'll draft the necessary responses to her petition, stalling for time while you complete these transfers. He tapped the folder. Meanwhile, I suggest you maintain appearances. Don't give any indication that you're aware of her plans beyond the divorce filing itself. Agreed. Callan rose, buttoning his jacket. How long do we have? Initial hearings won't be scheduled for at least 60 days. Discovery will take months after that. If we're careful, we can use the time to our advantage. Good. Callan extended his hand. Thank you, Ronan. For everything. As they shook hands, Ronan held his gaze. Just remember, in cases like this, winning isn't always what you think it will be. Callan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. In this case, winning is simple. When it's over, I walk away with everything I built. And Lena? She gets exactly what she deserves. Nothing. As he left the office, Callan's phone buzzed with a message from Harlow. Transfer complete. You now officially own 0% of weak enterprises on paper. How does it feel to be unemployed? He smiled as he typed back. Liberating. Because for the first time since finding those divorce papers, Callan felt something other than betrayal and rage. He felt in control. And if there was one thing Callan Week understood, it was the power of control. Callan sat in his parked BMW, positioned with a clear view of the Harbor View Hotel's private entrance. The leather seat had grown uncomfortable over the 3 hours he'd been waiting, but discomfort was a small price for certainty. His phone buzzed on the console. Harlow again. Any sign of them? He typed back a quick negative, then returned to his vigil. This wasn't the first stakeout he'd conducted, but it was the first time he'd insisted on doing it personally. The private investigators he'd hired were thorough, but some things a man needed to see with his own eyes. A sleek black Audi pulled up to the entrance. Sebastian Crowley stepped out, adjusted his tie, and handed his keys to the valet. Even from a distance, Callan could see the man's self-satisfied smile as he checked his watch point. 20 minutes later, a taxi arrived. Lena emerged, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the overcast day. She'd changed since breakfast, Callan noted. The casual blouse and jeans she'd worn at home had been replaced by a dress that clung to her figure, a strategic choice that made his stomach turn. Through his telephoto lens, Callan captured a series of shots. Lena entering the hotel, Sebastian greeting her in the lobby with a kiss that was decidedly not between client and attorney, their hands intertwined as they walked to the elevator. He lowered the camera, a strange calm settling over him. There was a certain relief in having suspicions confirmed, in watching the last illusions crumble. The woman walking into that hotel wasn't just betraying her husband, she was making a mockery of the legal system itself. Got them. He texted Harlow, attaching one of the photos. Both arrived separately, meeting in the hotel. Need me to call with a fake emergency so you can leave? Came a reply, no. I need to see this through. He settled in to wait, reviewing emails on his tablet. 2 hours later, Sebastian emerged alone, looking rumpled despite his expensive suit. 30 minutes after that, Lena appeared, her hair freshly styled, lipstick reapplied. Acting skills Callan had once admired now revealed themselves as weapons in her arsenal of deception. He watched her hail a taxi. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Ronan Baxter. I'm assuming you're not at the office, Ronan said when Callan answered. Just wrapping up some personal business, Callan replied, starting his car as Lena's taxi pulled away. What's happened? Sebastian Crowley just filed additional motions in your case. He's requesting an emergency hearing on temporary support and exclusive use of the primary residence. Callan laughed, a short, bitter sound. Interesting timing. Callan. Ronan's voice sharpened. Tell me you're not doing anything that could compromise our position. I'm gathering evidence, Ronan. Evidence that my wife is having an inappropriate relationship with her legal counsel. evidence that said counsel is using that relationship to manipulate the legal process for his own benefit and hers. A heavy sigh came through the speaker. While I appreciate the initiative, this kind of surveillance could backfire spectacularly if not handled correctly. It's being handled correctly, Callan assured him, pulling into traffic to follow Lena's taxi at a discreet distance. The photographers are licensed. The footage is obtained in public places or locations where there's no expectation of privacy. Everything is time-stamped and authenticated. And what exactly do you plan to do with this evidence? Callan watched as Lena's taxi turned toward her neighborhood now. He'd moved out weeks ago, though he still kept clothes there and occasionally stayed overnight to maintain appearances. Exactly what you'd expect, he said. File an ethics complaint against Sebastian. Use the conflict of interest to have him removed from a case. And ensure the judge understands exactly who they're dealing with. And if that doesn't work, judges have seen worse without blinking. Then we move to Plan B. Callan's voice hardened. We make it personal. The silence on the other end stretched until Ronan finally spoke. I won't ask what that means. Just promise me you won't cross any legal lines. I can defend aggressive tactics. I can't defend illegal ones. Everything I do will be completely legal, Callan promised. Unethical? Perhaps, but no more so than what they're doing. That's a dangerous line of reasoning, Ronan warned. It's the only reasoning that works against people who don't recognize boundaries. After ending the call, Callan continued following the taxi until it turned onto the street where the home he'd purchased 7 years ago stood a modern masterpiece of glass and steel that had once represented everything he'd achieved. Now, it was just another battleground that he parked 2 blocks away and watched as Lena entered the house. Through the large windows, he could see her moving through the front rooms, phone to her ear, likely reporting to Sebastian that their latest maneuver had been executed. His own phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, "Emergency hearing scheduled week versus week." The date was set for 3 days later. They were trying to rush the process, hoping to secure advantages before he could properly respond. A classic tactic from Sebastian's playbook, designed to pressure opponents into unfavorable settlements. Callan smiled grimly. They still thought they were dealing with an ordinary man, wounded by betrayal and desperate to avoid public exposure. They had no idea what was coming that he started his car and drove to his new apartment downtown, a sleek, minimalist space lacking all the personal touches that had made his house a home. But it served its purpose, a command center from which to wage his private war. Inside, he spread the day's photographs across his dining table, examining each one with clinical detachment. Then he opened his laptop, logged into a secure server, and added them to the growing file labeled as C+LV evidence. Next, he placed a call to a number not saved in his contacts. "This is Jackson," answered a gruff voice. "It's weak. I need something on Sebastian Crowley. Something beyond the affair. Professional or personal. Both. Whatever you can find that would make the State Bar Association take notice." Callan paused. And anything that might explain his sudden interest in weak enterprises specifically. You think there's more to it than just a divorce. Sebastian specializes in high-asset divorces, but he usually aims for quick settlements with minimal publicity. This aggressive approach isn't his style unless there's something specific he wants. "I'll look into it," Jackson promised. "My usual fee, double it if you find something substantive within 48 hours. After ending the call, Callan moved to the wall of his home office where a complex diagram had been pinned a map of connections, properties, accounts, and relationships. At its center were 2 photographs, Lena and Sebastian. Around them, a web expanded outward, encompassing their known associates, financial holdings, and patterns of behavior. He added a new note beside Sebastian's image. "Emergency hearing seeking residents plus temp support." Why the rush? Then he stepped back, studying the entire picture. Some would call it obsessive. Callan preferred thorough. In business, he'd learned that patterns revealed intentions. People telegraphed their moves long before they made them, if you knew how to read the signs, and Callan had become very good at reading signs where Lena was concerned. His phone buzzed again. "Harlow." Lena just called the foundation, asked if they could expedite the quarterly disbursement to her personal project fund. They told her it had to go through you first. Callan frowned. The foundation, Lena's pet project that he'd funded as an anniversary gift 3 years ago, operated independently, but major financial decisions required joint approval. Her personal project fund was supposedly for mentoring underprivileged women in business. In reality, it functioned as her private slush fund, with minimal oversight. Tell them to delay, he replied. Say I'm traveling and unavailable to approve large transfers until next week. Already done. She wasn't happy. Threatened to call an emergency board meeting to override you. Let her try. The bylaws require 72 hours notice for any meeting. By then, we'll have had the hearing. He added another note to his diagram. LV seeking quick cash foundation route. The pattern was becoming clearer. Lena needed money, and she needed it fast. The question was, why? He turned to his laptop and opened a specialized program designed for financial analysts. Into it, he entered the codes for Lena's personal accounts he had access to as her husband and the primary account holder. Ethically questionable, perhaps, but no more so than her actions. The program displayed her recent transactions, highlighting unusual patterns. Nothing immediately suspicious appeared, but a series of cash withdrawals over the past month totaled just under $50,000, small enough individually to avoid triggering alerts, but collectively significant. He photographed the screen, added the image to his evidence file, then logged out. Another piece of the puzzle, though he wasn't yet sure where it fit, that a notification appeared on his phone. The security system at the house had been activated. Lena was leaving again. He checked the time. 8:47 p.m. Too late for foundation business. Too early for dinner. Another meeting with Sebastian, perhaps? He considered following her again, but decided against it. Jackson would handle the surveillance tonight. Callan had other preparations to make for the emergency hearing. Opening his safe, he removed a small voice recorder and a USB drive. The recorder contained conversations between himself and Lena from the past month, conversations where she had unwittingly revealed aspects of her strategy. The USB drive held financial records that contradicted the declarations she'd filed with the court. Tomorrow, he would deliver both to Ronan. The day after, they would be ready for whatever Sebastian and Lena threw at them in court. Callan poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and walked to the window. From his 32nd floor apartment, the city spread out before him, a tapestry of lights against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Lena was plotting his downfall, confident in her ability to outmaneuver him. He raised his glass in a silent toast. Let her plot. Let her scheme. In the end, only one of them would be left standing, and Callan Week had no intention of falling. The emergency hearing went exactly as Callan had predicted, a theatrical performance by Sebastian, countered by Ronan's cool professionalism. The judge, unimpressed by either side's urgency, ordered the status quo maintained until proper financial disclosures could be reviewed. No exclusive use of the residence. No emergency support payments. That a minor victory, but not the decisive blow Callan sought. Now, 2 weeks later, he sat across from Harlow in a private dining room at Vespri, an upscale Italian restaurant frequented by the city's business elite. His sister, 3 years his senior and infinitely more cynical, cut into her salmon with surgical precision. She tried accessing the Aspen property yesterday, Harlow said between bites. The management company called to verify her authorization after the new security protocols flagged her attempt. Callan nodded, making a note on his phone. And they followed the script exactly. Very apologetic, but unfortunately, Mrs. Weeks' access had been temporarily suspended pending review by the owner. That's me, of course, though they didn't specify that part. How did she react? Harlow smiled thinly. According to the manager, and I quote, like someone had just told her her dog died. Demanded to speak to you directly. When that didn't work, she threatened legal action. Let her try, Callan murmured. The property was purchased before our marriage. It's never been in joint names. She may not know that, Harlow pointed out. You've never been one to discuss the details of your holdings, even with your wife. Especially with my wife, as it turns out. He set down his fork, his appetite diminished. Any movement on the credit cards? Harlow pulled out her tablet, tapped through several screens, then turned it toward him. 4 attempts to use the platinum card in the past week. All declined. She hasn't tried the others yet. The screen showed transaction attempts at Bergdorf Goodman, a high-end restaurant, a jewelry store, and most recently, a luxury car dealership. A car dealership? Callan raised an eyebrow. Maserati, specifically. Harlow's tone was dry. Apparently, she's in the market for a new vehicle. A modest $70,000 upgrade from her current Mercedes. Which is still in my name, Callan noted. As is the insurance. Speaking of which, Harlow swiped to another screen. I had the coverage modified as you requested. The Mercedes is still insured, but only for you as the driver. Anyone else is no longer covered. Has she noticed? Not yet, but she will if she gets pulled over or, God forbid, has an accident. Harlow studied him over the rim of her wine glass. You're playing a dangerous game, little brother. I'm protecting what's mine by pulling financial support out from under her bit by bit, like a game of high-stakes Jenga. She set down her glass. Don't misunderstand. I fully support destroying her. I just want you to recognize the risk. Push too hard, too fast, and she might realize what's happening before all the pieces are in place. Callan leaned back, considering. You're right. We need to maintain the illusion that her setbacks are isolated incidents, not a coordinated campaign. Exactly. The credit card declined? Must be a processing error. Access to the Aspen house revoked? A security update gone wrong. The foundation funds delayed? Administrative oversight. And when all these accidents accumulate, Callan asked, Harlow's smile was razor-sharp. By then, it will be too late for her to recover. Their conversation paused as the server entered to clear their plates and offer dessert. Both declined, requesting coffee instead. When they were alone again, Harlow lowered her voice. Jackson sent his preliminary report on Sebastian. Callan straightened. And it's interesting, to say the least. She slid a folder across the table, keeping it partially concealed beneath her napkin. Your instincts were right. Sebastian's interest in weak enterprises goes beyond the divorce settlement. Callan opened the folder, scanning the contents quickly. His eyes narrowed as he read. He's representing Meridian Partners in their acquisition talks, he said, looking up sharply. That's a direct conflict of interest. Harlow nodded. Meridian has been trying to acquire weak enterprises for 18 months. Their last offer was rejected by the board by you 6 weeks before Lena filed for divorce. And now Sebastian is working both angles. Callan's jaw tightened. If Lena gets her half of the company in the divorce, she could force a sale to Meridian, Harlow finished. And Sebastian collects fees from both transactions. Does Lena know? Unknown. Jackson is still digging. But here's the interesting part. Harlow tapped a paragraph near the bottom of the page. Sebastian's firm is in financial trouble. 3 partners left last quarter, taking major clients with them. He needs a big win. The server returned with their coffee. Callan waited until they were alone again before responding. So his aggressive approach isn't just his standard playbook. It's desperation. He took a sip of his coffee, mind racing. This changes things. We need to accelerate. Accelerate what exactly? Harlow's tone was cautious. The mortgage on the house, Callan said. Move it from suspended to active foreclosure proceedings. Harlow's eyebrows shot up. That's nuclear, Callan. Once that process starts, it can be stopped just as easily, he countered. But will force her hand. If she's scrambling to save the house, she won't have time to focus on the business aspects of the divorce. And if she calls your bluff, it's not a bluff. The mortgage is now held by Horizon Capital, your company. 3 months of missed payments I've been making until now are ground for foreclosure. Harlow studied him for a long moment. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Not everything, Callan admitted, but enough. Sebastian wants weak enterprises. Lena wants the money it will bring when sold to Meridian. Neither of them will get what they want. And what about you? Harlow asked softly. What do you want when this is all over? Callan's expression hardened. Justice. Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, little brother. In this case, they are. He closed the folder and handed it back to her. Initiate the foreclosure proceedings. And have Jackson continue his investigation into Sebastian's connection with Meridian. I want every detail, every meeting, every communication. Harlow accepted the folder with a sigh. Consider done. But Callan, be careful. People are most dangerous when cornered. I'm counting on it, he replied, his voice cold. Because cornered is exactly where I want them. 3 days later, Callan watched from his car as a courier delivered the foreclosure notice to the house. Through binoculars, he observed Lena's face as she opened the envelope on the front step. The progression of emotions, confusion, disbelief, rage played across her features like scenes in a familiar film. She pulled out her phone immediately, undoubtedly calling Sebastian. Her gestures became animated, her free hand slicing through the air as she paced the porch. That Callan's phone buzzed with a text from Ronan. Just received angry call from Crowley Re. Foreclosure notice. Demanding immediate conference. How do you want to respond? Tell him we're unavailable until next week, Callan replied. Cite previous commitments that can't be rescheduled. This will escalate things, came Ronan's warning. That's the plan. Callan lowered his binoculars as Lena stormed back into the house. The first tremor had been felt. Now to wait for the aftershocks, he didn't have to wait long. That evening, as he worked in his apartment, his security system alerted him to an unexpected visitor. The lobby camera showed Lena arguing with the concierge, waving what appeared to be legal documents. His phone rang moments later. Mr. Week, the concierge said, there's a woman here who claims to be your wife. She's insisting on coming up to your unit. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Callan corrected calmly. Does she have a key to the building? No, sir. Then she doesn't have authorization to enter. Please inform her that if she has documents to deliver, she can do so through proper legal channels. Yes, sir. Would you like me to call security? Callan considered the question. Not yet. Give her the option to leave the documents with you for delivery. If she refuses or becomes disruptive, then yes, please involve security. He ended the call and moved to his window, which offered a partial view of the building's entrance. 5 minutes later, Lena emerged, face flushed with anger. She looked up, scanning the windows as if she could pinpoint his location through sheer force of will. For a moment, Callan felt a twinge of something, not regret, exactly, but recognition. The woman standing there, vibrating with rage, was once the person he'd thought would share his life forever. When had that woman disappeared? Or had she ever existed at all? His phone rang again. Lena. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message she left. You think you're so clever with this foreclosure nonsense? Her voice seethed. Did you forget I have access to all our accounts? I know exactly what you're doing, Callan. Sebastian says this is borderline illegal, and we're going to fight it. You can't just hide assets and pretend the house isn't marital property. Call me back, or the next conversation we have will be in front of the judge. He saved the message, more evidence of her volatility, and turned back to his computer. His email showed a new message from Jackson, marked urgent. The subject line read simply, meeting confirmed. Tomorrow, Meridian offices, 3 p.m. The body contained only an attachment, a calendar invitation forwarded from Sebastian's email account to Lena's, confirming a meeting with Meridian Partners CEO to discuss potential acquisition opportunities. Callan forwarded the email to Ronan with a brief message, smoking gun. Within minutes, his phone rang. Where did you get this? Ronan demanded without preamble. Does it matter? It absolutely matters if it was obtained illegally, Ronan snapped. I cannot and will not present illegally obtained evidence in court. It was forwarded by a confidential source with legitimate access, Callan assured him. The provenance can be established if necessary. Ronan's sigh was audible. This is a significant conflict of interest. Sebastian representing both Lena in your divorce and Meridian in their attempt to acquire your company? The Bar Association would have a field day. Exactly. So what's our next move? We don't do anything yet. We let them have their meeting. We let Sebastian dig himself deeper into this ethical quagmire. And then, when the time is right, we present this evidence as part of a comprehensive ethics complaint. And when is the right time? Callan pressed. When it will do maximum damage, Ronan replied, his tone hardening. You wanted a war, Callan. This is how wars are won, not with impulsive strikes, but with carefully timed offensives. After ending the call, Callan returned to his workstation, where a complex timeline of events was displayed across 3 monitors. To it, he added a new entry: meeting C, LV, and Meridian CEO. Potential acquisition discussion. The pieces were aligning perfectly. Lena, facing financial pressure from the foreclosure and credit restrictions, would be increasingly desperate for a quick resolution. Sebastian, needing a win to salvage his firm's finances, would push harder for settlement terms favorable to Meridian's acquisition plans. Both of them, consumed by greed and desperation, would make mistakes. And Callan would be waiting, ready to capitalize on every misstep. He opened a secure server where he stored his evidence and created a new folder, Ethics Complaint SC. Into it, he placed copies of the meeting invitation, the surveillance photos, the financial records showing Sebastian's firm's precarious position, and a draft of the formal complaint he would eventually file. The foundation was laid. Now it was simply a matter of timing, and Callan Week had always been a patient man. The conference room at Baxter Legal hummed with tension. Callan sat at one end of the polished oak table, Ronan at his side. Across from them, Lena's rigid posture betrayed her fury despite her composed expression. Sebastian, looking less polished than usual, had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, the picture of a man working tirelessly for his client. Between them lay scattered documents, financial disclosures, asset inventories, proposed settlement terms, the detritus of a marriage being dismantled piece by piece. "This foreclosure action is pure harassment," Sebastian said, jabbing a finger at the notice. "The mortgage has never been in arrears. Callan has controlled those payments throughout the marriage. The mortgage is now held by Horizon Capital," Ronan replied calmly. "Their payment records indicate 3 missed payments. Whatever arrangements existed previously with the original lender are no longer applicable." Horizon Capital, Sebastian scoffed, conveniently owned by Harlow Week. "This is transparent asset manipulation, and the court will see it for exactly what it is." Callan remained silent, watching Lena rather than Sebastian. Her eyes flickered with each exchange, calculating, reassessing. She was the real threat in the room. Sebastian was merely her instrument. "My client has been more than generous in his proposed settlement," Ronan continued, sliding a document across the table. $50,000 cash, continued health insurance coverage for 1 year, and the Mercedes transferred fully into Mrs. Week's name, of course. Lena laughed, to sound brittle. "Generous? Are you joking? After 12 years of marriage, he offers me a pittance and expects gratitude. 12 years during which you contributed nothing to the acquisition of assets," Callan said, breaking his silence. "Nothing to the growth of Week Enterprises. Nothing except spending money you didn't earn. I built your social connections," Lena snapped. "I managed our home, our social calendar, our reputation. You managed your shopping schedule," Callan corrected, his tone icy. "You attended events when it suited you, left when you were bored, and embarrassed me more often than not with your behavior." Sebastian raised a hand. "This isn't productive. Let's focus on the legal issues at hand." "Fine," Callan said, leaning forward. "Let's discuss your meeting with Meridian Partners yesterday." The change in the room was immediate. Sebastian's face drained of color. Lena's eyes widened briefly before she controlled her reaction. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sebastian said, too quickly. Ronan opened a folder and removed a printed email. "This is a calendar invitation for a meeting between you, Mrs. Week, and Christopher Ellis, CEO of Meridian Partners. The subject line reads, 'Potential acquisition opportunities.' My firm represents many clients," Sebastian countered, recovering slightly. "Meridian happens to be one of them. There's no conflict. There is when you're representing Mrs. Week in a divorce that could potentially result in her acquiring shares of Week Enterprises shares that Meridian has been trying to purchase for over a year." Ronan's voice remained measured, but his eyes were steely. "That's not just a conflict of interest. It's an ethical violation that could result in disbarment." Lena looked sharply at Sebastian. "You said this was handled." "It is," Sebastian assured her, though his confidence appeared shaken. "There's no proof of any impropriety. A meeting to discuss theoretical scenarios is hardly." "We have more than the invitation," Callan interrupted. "We have photographs of you entering Meridian's offices together. We have recordings of conversations discussing the potential sale. We have financial records showing transactions between your firm and Meridian dating back 6 months, well into the period you've been representing Mrs. Week. That's impossible, Sebastian snapped. Those conversations were private, were they? Callan smiled thinly. Or did you simply assume no one was listening? Sebastian's face flushed with anger. Whatever you think you have is being compiled into an ethics complaint that will be filed with the State Bar Association by the end of the week, Ronan finished. Unless, of course, we can reach a reasonable settlement today. The silence that followed was deafening. Lena and Sebastian exchanged glances, a wordless communication that Callan recognized all too well, the look of conspirators whose plans were unraveling. I need to confer with my client, Sebastian said finally. Privately. Ronan nodded. Of course. Take the adjacent office. We'll wait. As they left, Callan leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a small moment of satisfaction. The trap had been sprung, and now they were scrambling to escape it. They'll counter, Ronan said quietly once the door closed. Likely with a lawsuit of their own, defamation, invasion of privacy, something designed to create a distraction from the ethics complaint. Let them, Callan replied. Every action they take digs them deeper. Ronan studied him. You predicted this, didn't you? From the beginning. Not the details, Callan admitted, but the pattern, yes. Lena has always been reactive, impulsive when cornered. Sebastian has a reputation for aggressive countersuits when conventional tactics fail. Together, they're predictable. And the evidence? The recordings? Are they as comprehensive as you implied? Callan's smile was grim. Some, not all, but they don't know what we have and what we don't. That uncertainty is our advantage. 20 minutes later, Sebastian and Lena returned. The change in their demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable. Sebastian's forced confidence, Lena's tightly controlled anger. We've discussed your allegations, Sebastian began, and while we maintain that no ethical violations have occurred, we're prepared to offer a counter-settlement to resolve this matter efficiently. Ronan raised an eyebrow. We're listening. Mrs. Week will accept the $50,000, the Mercedes, and the health insurance coverage as proposed, Sebastian said. However, she also requires a 20% stake in Week Enterprises' non-voting shares only, with no involvement in operations. Impossible, Callan said immediately. I don't own Week Enterprises. As the financial disclosures clearly show, the company is owned by Harlow Week and various minority shareholders. I'm merely an employee who somehow lives in a multi-million-dollar apartment and drives a $100,000 car, Lena scoffed. No one believes that arrangement, Callan. It doesn't matter what anyone believes, Ronan interjected. What matters is what can be proven in court. And the ownership structure of Week Enterprises is thoroughly documented, dating back to its founding. Sebastian leaned forward. Then let's cut to the chase. If these arrangements are as legitimate as you claim, you won't object to a forensic accounting examination of Week Enterprises' ownership history and Callan's personal finances for the past 5 years. By an independent firm of our choosing, Lena added. Callan and Ronan exchanged glances. This was the counter-move they'd anticipated, a fishing expedition disguised as due diligence. We have no objection to a forensic examination, Ronan said carefully, provided it's conducted by a mutually agreed-upon firm and limited to ownership transfers directly relevant to the marital assets. Not good enough, Sebastian countered. We want complete access. You're in no position to make demands, Callan interrupted, his patience thinning. Not when you're facing an ethics complaint that could end your career. So here's our counter. Mrs. Week accepts our original offer, signs a confidentiality agreement regarding all matters related to Week Enterprises, and you, Mr. Crowley, voluntarily recuse yourself from representing her due to the conflict with Meridian. Sebastian's face darkened. That's not going to happen. Then neither is your forensic examination. Callan gathered his papers, signaling an end to the discussion. We're done here. You think you've won, Lena said, her voice low and dangerous. But you've just guaranteed this gets uglier. Callan met her gaze. It was always going to be ugly, Lena. You made sure of that when you decided to take what isn't yours. As they left the conference room, Sebastian placed a hand on Lena's arm, leaning close to whisper something. She nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. In the elevator, Ronan sighed. That could have gone better. It went exactly as expected, Callan replied. They're going to file a lawsuit, probably alleging fraud in the transfer of assets. They'll request an emergency injunction to freeze everything while they conduct their investigation. And you're prepared for that. Every transfer is documented, legitimate, and predates any marital issues by years. Let them investigate. They'll find nothing that won't stand up in court. Back in his office, Ronan poured them each a drink. To meticulous planning, he said, raising his glass. Callan raised his own, but didn't drink immediately. There's something else we need to discuss. Something I've been tracking that doesn't quite fit the pattern. Go on. Lena's cash withdrawals. 50,000 in small amounts over the past month. Then yesterday, another 20,000 from her personal account, an account that should have been nearly empty given the credit card rejections and lack of new deposits. Ronan frowned. You think she has hidden funds? I think she has a secondary objective beyond the divorce settlement, Callan said. Something she's financing separately, something she doesn't want traced. Like what? I don't know yet. But Jackson is following the money. Callan finally took a sip of his drink. Whatever it is, it's important enough that she's liquidating her personal assets to fund it. Ronan set down his glass. Be careful, Callan. This fixation on Lena's every move, it's bordering on obsession. It's not obsession, Callan corrected. It's strategy. Understanding your opponent's resources and objectives is basic warfare. This isn't war. It's divorce. With Lena, Callan said grimly, there's no difference. True to their prediction, the lawsuit arrived the next morning, a sweeping allegation of fraudulent asset transfers, conspiracy between Callan and Harlow Week, and a request for an emergency injunction freezing all assets pending investigation. Callan read it in his apartment, a sense of satisfaction growing with each overblown accusation. They were desperate, reaching for anything that might stick. And in their desperation, they'd made a critical error. The lawsuit named Harlow personally. His phone rang. Harlow, of course. Did you see it? She asked without preamble. Just reading it now, Callan replied. Thoughts? They've made a serious mistake bringing me into this directly, Harlow said, her voice cool. Week Enterprises is now officially involved as a third party to their divorce, which means our corporate counsel will be filing a response. And our corporate counsel is Martinez and Kwan. Specifically, Elizabeth Martinez, who, as you know, sits on the Ethics Committee of the State Bar Association alongside Judge Barnes' husband. Harlow's satisfaction was audible. Small world, isn't it? Remarkably small, Callan agreed. And their response will focus on Sebastian's conflict of interest with Meridian, naturally. We'll be requesting his immediate disqualification from the case and sanctions for filing a frivolous lawsuit without proper due diligence. Callan smiled. Perfect. And Lena, once Sebastian is disqualified, she'll be left scrambling for new representation. No reputable attorney will touch this case with the ethics complaint pending. She'll be forced to either settle on our terms or proceed pro se. She won't settle, Callan said with certainty. Her pride won't allow it. Then she'll lose everything, Harlow replied simply. No attorney, no financial resources, no credibility with the court. It's checkmate in 3 moves. Callan ended the call and walked to his window, watching the city below. The lawsuit had been their last desperate gambit, a high-risk move born of panic and poor judgment. Now it would become the instrument of their destruction. His phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. Found the money trail. Meeting in 30 at the usual place, Callan grabbed his jacket. Whatever Lena was planning with that cash, he was about to find out. And knowledge, as always, was power. The courtroom felt smaller today, more confining, as if the walls themselves were pressing in to witness the final act of the drama. Callan adjusted his tie, a gesture of calm amid the storm brewing around him. Beside him, Ronan arranged documents with methodical precision, each folder color-coded and labeled. Across the aisle, Lena sat alone, her new attorney having withdrawn from the case just days ago, the third to do so since Sebastian's disqualification. Her crimson dress seemed a deliberate choice, a battle flag unfurled in defiance. Despite everything, Callan had to admire her resilience, misguided though it was. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Barnes entered the courtroom. The judge settled into her chair, surveying the room with practiced neutrality. "Be seated. We're here for the final hearing in Week versus Week. I've reviewed the submissions from both parties, including Mrs. Week's request to represent herself after the withdrawal of counsel." She turned to Lena. "Mrs. Week, while I understand your frustration with the succession of attorneys who have withdrawn from your case, I must caution you that proceeding without legal representation in a matter of this complexity is ill-advised." Lena's chin lifted. "I understand, Your Honor, but I'm prepared to proceed." Judge Barnes nodded, unconvinced. "Very well. Mr. Baxter, you may begin." Ronan stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. Before addressing the proposed settlement terms, we believe it necessary to bring several matters to the court's attention that directly impact these proceedings." He approached the bench with a thick folder. "What I'm presenting contains evidence of persistent misconduct that undermines the integrity of this case. Specifically, evidence of Mrs. Week's ongoing relationship with her former counsel, Sebastian Crowley, and their coordinated efforts to secure a disproportionate divorce settlement for the purpose of facilitating a business acquisition by Meridian Partners." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lena half rose from her seat, then seemed to think better of it, sinking back down. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Baxter," Judge Barnes said, accepting the folder. "Mrs. Week will have the opportunity to respond, of course." "Of course, Your Honor," Ronan agreed. "Additionally, we have evidence of financial misconduct by Mrs. Week during the pendency of these proceedings. Specifically, the diversion of foundation funds for personal use and attempts to liquidate marital assets in violation of the court's standstill order." Judge Barnes opened the folder, her expression unchanging as she examined the first few pages. "I see. And the relevance to today's hearing. These actions demonstrate a pattern of bad faith negotiation that has unnecessarily prolonged these proceedings and wasted judicial resources," Ronan explained. "They also provide context for our client's protective measures regarding asset management, which Mrs. Week has characterized as financial abuse in her filings." The judge turned to Lena. "Mrs. Week, do you wish to respond to these allegations before we proceed?" Lena stood, smoothing her dress. "Your Honor, what Mr. Baxter has presented is a distorted narrative designed to villainize me while distracting from the real issue: my husband's systematic concealment of marital assets. Do you deny the specific allegations regarding Mr. Crowley and Meridian Partners?" Judge Barnes asked directly. Lena hesitated just long enough for Callan to know she was calculating her answer. "My relationship with Mr. Crowley after his withdrawal as counsel is irrelevant to these proceedings, and any discussions with Meridian were exploratory only, contingent on the outcome of this divorce." "I see." Judge Barnes made a note. "And the financial transactions Mr. Baxter referenced." "The foundation is my project," Lena said, her voice hardening. "Funds were allocated according to established protocols for legitimate charitable purposes, including cash withdrawals totaling $70,000 in the past 6 weeks. Ronan interjected. "That's not," Lena began, then stopped herself. "Those funds were for a special initiative that required confidentiality." Judge Barnes raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Week, are you prepared to provide documentation of this initiative and how these funds were utilized?" Lena's hesitation was more pronounced this time. "I would need time to compile those records, Your Honor." "I thought you might." Judge Barnes closed the folder and leaned forward. "Here's where we stand. I've reviewed the financial disclosures from both parties, including the supplemental documentation regarding Week Enterprises' ownership structure. I've also reviewed the prenuptial agreement, which, despite Mrs. Week's objections, appears properly executed and enforceable." She turned to Callan. "Mr. Week, your proposed settlement offers Mrs. Week $50,000, the Mercedes automobile, and continued health coverage for 1 year. Is that still your position?" "It is, Your Honor," Callan confirmed, speaking for the first time. "Mrs. Week, your counterproposal requests half of all marital assets, which you value at approximately $8 million, plus ongoing support of $15,000 monthly for 5 years. Is that accurate? Yes, Your Honor, Lena replied. Given the length of our marriage and the lifestyle to which I've become accustomed. The prenuptial agreement specifically addresses these issues, Judge Barnes interrupted. And given the evidence presented regarding your conduct during these proceedings, I'm disinclined to set it aside. Lena's face paled. Your Honor, that agreement was signed under circumstances that have been thoroughly examined by this court. Judge Barnes finished firmly, including depositions from the attorneys present at its execution, all of whom testified to your competence and voluntary participation. She shuffled through some papers before continuing. Based on the evidence before me, I'm prepared to rule as follows. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. Mr. Weeks' proposed settlement terms are consistent with that agreement and are hereby approved. A small gasp escaped Lena. Callan remained perfectly still, his expression neutral despite the vindication flooding through him. Additionally, Judge Barnes continued, given the evidence of misconduct presented today, I am referring the matter of Mr. Crowley's potential ethics violations to the State Bar Association for review. Mrs. Week, while you're not subject to the same professional standards, I strongly caution you that any continued attempts to circumvent this court's orders regarding asset disposition will result in sanctions. She looked directly at Lena. Do you understand? Lena nodded stiffly, her composure cracking. Yes, Your Honor. Then, unless there are other matters to address, this hearing is concluded. The divorce is granted on grounds of irreconcilable differences. The settlement terms as proposed by Mr. Week are incorporated into the final decree. Judge Barnes signed the document before her. We're adjourned. As the gavel fell, the tension that had held Callan rigid for months began to dissolve. It was over. Every calculation, every maneuver, every sacrifice had led to this moment of absolute victory. Ronan squeezed his shoulder. Congratulations. You won. We won, Callan corrected, gathering his papers. Across the aisle, Lena stood frozen, the reality of her situation seemingly just dawning on her. Her gaze found Callan's, burning with a mixture of rage and disbelief. This isn't finished, she said as he passed her, voice low and venomous. Callan paused, turning to face her fully. Actually, Lena, it is. Completely and irrevocably finished. Just like us. You've taken everything from me, she hissed, tears of fury brightening her eyes. No, Callan replied calmly. I've simply ensured you leave with exactly what you brought to our marriage. Nothing. As he turned to leave, she grabbed his arm. You'll regret this. I promise you, Callan. Mrs. Week, Judge Barnes called sharply from the bench. This courtroom is not the place for personal confrontation. Please conduct yourself appropriately. Lena released him, hands trembling with suppressed emotion. Without another word, Callan walked away, each step lighter than the last. Behind him, he heard the sound of papers being scattered, a frustrated cry quickly stifled. In the corridor outside. Ronan handed him the signed decree. It's done. Legally and finally done. Callan took the document, its weight insignificant compared to the burden he'd carried for so long. What happens to her now? That's not your concern anymore, Ronan reminded him gently. I know. I'm just curious. Ronan sighed. She has the $50,000 in the car. The house is in foreclosure, her credit is ruined, and her reputation in their social circle is damaged beyond repair. She'll have to start over completely. Good, Callan said, surprising himself with the lack of emotion in his voice. It wasn't satisfaction he felt, or even relief. Just emptiness. What about Sebastian? The ethics complaint will proceed. Given the evidence, disbarment is likely. Callan nodded, tucking the decree into his briefcase. Then it's truly over. As they walked toward the courthouse exit, Harlow appeared, elegant in a charcoal suit that emphasized her resemblance to Callan. Well, she asked simply. Complete victory, Ronan answered. The judge enforced the prenup exactly as written. Harlow's smile was satisfied but restrained. And Lena, taking it about as well as expected, Callan said dryly. She'll recover, Harlow predicted. Women like Lena always do. The question is, will you? Callan glanced at her, surprised by the question. I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be? Because you spent 18 months living and breathing this divorce. Planning, calculating, executing a strategy that consumed your every waking moment. Harlow studied him closely. What fills that void now? Life? Callan answered simply. Business. The future. As they reached the courthouse steps, a flurry of activity near the entrance caught their attention. Lena, still flushed with anger, was giving an impromptu statement to a small cluster of reporters, undoubtedly painting herself as the victim of a calculated financial conspiracy. Should we be concerned about that? Ronan asked, nodding toward the spectacle. No, Callan replied. Let her have her moment. The truth is in the court record. He turned away, deliberately putting the scene and Lena behind him. Let's go. We have a company to run. As they walked to the waiting car, Callan felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not vindication, but something closer to peace. The battle was won. The war was over, and he had emerged not just victorious, but unbroken. 2 months later, Callan stood at the window of his office at Week Enterprises, watching rain streak the glass in silvery rivulets. The city below was muted by the downpour, buildings blurred at the edges like watercolors bleeding into each other. It matched his mood, not melancholy exactly, but contemplative that a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called, turning from the window. Harlow entered, tablet in hand. The quarterly reports are in. Revenue up 17% year over year. The Meridian acquisition attempt is officially dead. Their board voted yesterday to pursue other opportunities. Good. Callan returned to his desk, gesturing for her to sit. And the foundation, restructured as planned. The new board has approved redirecting funds to educational initiatives rather than Lena's pet projects. The press coverage has been positive. Everyone loves a corporate redemption story. Callan nodded, satisfied. The foundation had been one of his first priorities after the divorce, transforming it from Lena's social showcase into something with genuine impact. Anything else? Harlow hesitated, an unusual occurrence that immediately caught his attention. What is it? He asked. News about Lena. She set the tablet on his desk, displaying a local news article. I thought you should see it. The headline read, Socialite evicted from luxury apartment amid financial troubles. Below it, a grainy photograph showed Lena, noticeably less polished than in her days as Mrs. Week, arguing with what appeared to be a building manager. Callan skimmed the article, absorbing key phrases. Third residence in 2 months. Legal troubles mounting. Sources close to Von Week suggest gambling debts. Gambling? He asked, looking up. That's what the cash withdrawals were for. Harlow nodded. According to Jackson's final report, yes. Apparently, it started as a distraction during her marriage. Small amounts at first, then escalating as the divorce proceedings intensified. By the end, she was losing tens of thousands every week. And Sebastian knew. Not only knew, but enabled it. He connected her with private games when the casinos started limiting her action. Callan leaned back, processing this revelation. So, while she was accusing me of financial manipulation, she was burning through cash at poker tables and private betting clubs. Harlow finished. The ultimate irony. Callan closed the article, pushing the tablet away. Where is she now? A 1-bedroom apartment in the East District. The Mercedes was repossessed last week after she fell behind on the payments. She's reportedly working as a consultant for a small event planning company, though working might be generous. She's missed more days than she's shown up. And Sebastian? The ethics hearing is next month. His firm has already asked him to resign. Most of his clients have jumped ship. Harlow studied him. Does knowing this change anything for you? Callan considered the question, searching himself for any trace of the anger that had driven him for so long. To his surprise, he found only a hollow sort of recognition. No, it just confirms what I already knew. She was always going to self-destruct, with or without my help. Do you regret any of it? Harlow asked quietly. The methods, the intensity of the pursuit. No, Callan said after a moment. She tried to take everything from me, not just assets, but my company, my reputation, my future. She deserved to lose. He met his sister's gaze. Does that make me cruel? It makes you human, Harlow replied simply, and perhaps more like our father than either of us would care to admit. The comparison struck a nerve, as Harlow had likely intended. Their father, Richard Week, had been a businessman of legendary ruthlessness, effective but unforgiving, particularly with those who betrayed his trust. I'm not him, Callan said firmly. He would have destroyed her for sport. This was self-preservation. Of course, Harlow agreed, too easily. Well, I just thought you should know. Full situational awareness, as you always prefer. She rose to leave, but paused at the door. By the way, Claire Preston from the Thompson acquisition asked about you again. She's persistent. I'll give her that. Callan raised an eyebrow. And nothing. Just an observation. Harlow shrugged. Life goes on, little brother. Even after divorce. After she left, Callan returned to the window, watching the rain begin to ease, sunlight breaking through in isolated beams that illuminated sections of the city with golden light. Life does go on, he thought. But not the same life. Not the same man. The Callan Week who had trusted blindly, who had believed in the possibility of shared dreams and mutual support, that man was gone, replaced by someone more cautious, more calculating. Someone who understood that trust was a commodity too precious to be given freely. Was that Lena's final victory? That even in defeat, she had changed him irrevocably? No, he decided. The change wasn't her victory. It was his evolution, painful but necessary. Like all significant growth, his phone buzzed with a message from Ronan. Final paperwork from the house sale processed. All ties to LVW officially severed. Callan typed back a simple acknowledgement, then set the phone aside. Another chapter closed. Another link broken. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the city washed clean, glistening in the afternoon sun. A blank canvas. A fresh start. Perhaps Harlow was right. Perhaps it was time to look forward rather than back. Not to forget never that, but to channel the lessons into something constructive. Weak enterprises had expansion opportunities to consider. The foundation needed a leader with vision. And yes, perhaps even his personal life deserved some attention after the self-imposed isolation of the past 2 years. Later that evening, as Callan left the office, he made an impulsive decision. Instead of his usual route home, he drove to the waterfront, parking near the pier where he and Lena had once spent countless evenings in the early days of their relationship. The area had changed. New restaurants, new shops, new faces. Nothing remained of the place, he remembered, except the view itself, the endless horizon where water met sky. The promise of possibilities stretching beyond sight. He walked to the railing, listening to the rhythmic wash of waves against the pilings below. A few couples strolled along the boardwalk, hands linked, faces turned toward each other in that particular way of people who believe their connection is unique in the universe. Once he had been one of them, confident in the permanence of chosen bonds, certain that love, once given, could never truly be withdrawn. Now he knew better. Love was conditional. Trust was earned, moment by moment, choice by choice. And some betrayals could never be forgiven. He didn't regret his actions. Given the same circumstances, he would make the same choices again. But standing there, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, Callan allowed himself to acknowledge the cost of victory, not in dollars or assets, but in the hardening of something essential within himself. Was it worth it? To protect what he'd built, to ensure Lena couldn't destroy the work of a lifetime? Yes, he decided. Without question. As he turned to leave, his phone rang. Claire Preston, the woman Harlow had mentioned. He hesitated, then answered. Claire, he said, his voice warming despite himself. This is unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? She asked, the smile evident in her voice. Good, he found himself answering truthfully. Definitely good. As they spoke, arranging dinner for the following evening, Callan realized something unexpected. He was looking forward to it. Not with the desperate hope of his younger self, but with a measured curiosity, a willingness to explore possibilities without expectations. That night, for the first time in years, he slept without dreams of betrayal or revenge. When he woke, the emptiness that had followed his courtroom victory had been replaced by something unfamiliar, yet welcome. Anticipation for what came next. The chapter with Lena was closed. Her story would continue without him, as his would without her. Whether she recovered from her downfall or continued her descent was, as Ronan had reminded him, no longer his concern. He had won. She had lost. The scales were balanced. And in that balance, perhaps, was the closest thing to justice the world had to offer. 6 months later, the benefit gala for the renamed Week Foundation for Educational Innovation transformed the Natural History Museum's Grand Hall into a shimmering wonderland of light and possibility. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic patterns across marble floors while conversation and laughter flowed as freely as the champagne. Callan, impeccable in his tuxedo, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting congratulations on the Foundation's new direction and record fundraising. At his side, Claire Preston complimented him perfectly, intelligent, poised, and refreshingly direct in her interactions. "Your sister is watching you again," Claire murmured, nodding subtly toward where Harlow stood conversing with the university president. "She has that analytical expression she gets when she's assessing a business prospect." Callan chuckled. "That's just her face. Besides, you passed her inspection weeks ago. Is that what that 3-hour lunch was? An inspection?" Claire's eyes sparkled with amusement. "And here I thought she was just being friendly. Harlow doesn't do friendly. She does strategic alliances." "And what do you do, Callan Week?" Claire asked, her tone light, but her eyes serious. Before he could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Security personnel had converged around someone attempting to enter, someone arguing loudly enough to rise above the orchestral music and party chatter. "Is that?" Claire began. "Lena," Callan confirmed, recognizing the voice even before he saw her. She looked different, still beautiful in a way that commanded attention, but diminished somehow. Her dress, while designer, showed signs of wear. Her makeup, slightly too heavy, couldn't quite conceal the exhaustion beneath. And her voice, once controlled even in anger, now carried a ragged edge of desperation. "I was invited," she insisted to the security team, blocking her entry. "Check the list again." Lena Von Week, the head of security, a discreet professional named Reynolds who had worked week events for years, shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your name isn't on our list. And without an invitation. This is my foundation." Lena's voice rose, attracting more stares. "I started it. I built it. Ask anyone here." Callan felt Claire's questioning gaze. "You should handle this," she said quietly, "before it escalates further." He nodded, squeezing her hand before making his way toward the entrance. Harlow intercepted him halfway there. "I'll take care of it," she offered, her expression grim. "No," Callan decided. "This is mine to handle." As he approached, Lena spotted him, her expression transforming from frustrated to triumphant. "Callan, tell them who I am. Tell them I belong here." He signaled to Reynolds, who stepped aside with clear reluctance. "It's all right. I'll handle this." Lena's smile was razor-sharp, victory glittering in her eyes as she stepped forward only to find Callan blocking her path, his expression neutral but unyielding. "Lena," he said, keeping his voice low, "this is a private event. You weren't invited." "Don't be ridiculous," she hissed, glancing around at the watching crowd. "This is my foundation. My project." It was, Callan corrected. "Now it's the Week Foundation for Educational Innovation. New mission, new board, new focus. And you're not part of it." Her face flushed with anger. "You can't just erase me. These people know me. They worked with me for years. And now they work with the new leadership team," Callan replied evenly. "Things change, Lena. People move on." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Move on? Is that what you've done? Found yourself a replacement already?" She nodded toward Claire, who stood watching from a discreet distance. "She's pretty, I'll give you that. Does she know what she's getting into? Does she know what you're capable of?" "This isn't the place for this conversation," Callan said firmly. "If you leave now, quietly, we can pretend this didn't happen. And if I don't?" Lena challenged, raising her voice slightly. "Will you have security drag me out? Create another scene to add to your narrative about your unstable ex-wife?" Callan sighed, genuine regret touching him briefly. Once, I would have done anything to avoid embarrassing you. That time has passed, but I'm still offering you a choice. Leave with dignity, or be escorted out. Either way, you're not staying. Something flickered in her eyes, a moment of clarity, perhaps, or simply the recognition of an immovable obstacle. You really did it, didn't you? Took everything. Left me with nothing. You left yourself with nothing, Callan corrected. The gambling, the affairs, the lies. Those are your choices, Lena, not mine. Her expression hardened. You never loved me. Not really. I did, Callan said, surprising himself with the admission. Completely. That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history suspended between them like a tangible thing. Finally, Lena stepped back. This isn't over, Callan. It is, he replied simply. It has been for a long time. You just haven't accepted it yet. He gestured to Reynolds, who stepped forward again. Mr. Reynolds will see you to your car. Goodbye, Lena. As she was escorted out, Callan felt a presence at his side. Claire, offering silent support. Ex-wife? She asked quietly. Yes, Callan confirmed. It's a long story. I imagine it is. Claire studied his face. Are you all right? Callan considered the question seriously. Yes, he said finally. I am. And it was true. Seeing Lena again diminished, desperate, still clinging to a past that no longer existed had triggered not anger or satisfaction, but a strange sort of closure. The woman who had once wielded such power over his emotions now seemed almost insignificant, a cautionary tale rather than a continuing threat. Do you want to leave? Claire asked. We could get some air, or call a night entirely. Callan shook his head, offering her his arm. No, this night is important for the Foundation, for the future, and that's where I want to focus now. As they rejoined the gala, Harlow appeared at his side. Crisis averted? Handled, Callan confirmed. Good, because the university president is ready to announce the scholarship program, and you need to be at the podium in 5 minutes. As Harlow led them toward the stage, Callan caught a glimpse of his reflection in one of the massive wall mirrors, his image superimposed over the glittering crowd behind him. He looked right, at ease in a way he hadn't been in years. Centered. The announcement went smoothly, the crowd responding with enthusiasm and open checkbooks to the Foundation's new initiative. Later, as the evening wound down, Callan found himself on the museum's terrace, enjoying a moment of quiet with Claire. Successful night, she observed, leaning against the balustrade. The Foundation raised nearly twice its goal. Thanks in large part to your team's strategy, Callan acknowledged. The corporate matching program was brilliant. She smiled, accepting the compliment. A good cause makes for an easy sell. Education changes lives, I know that firsthand. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. Finally, Claire spoke again. Are you ever going to tell me what happened between you and your ex-wife? Callan considered the question. Does it matter? Only if it still matters to you, she replied honestly. I'm not interested in competing with ghosts, Callan. There's no competition, he assured her. Lena is part of my past, a chapter that's closed. And what chapter are we in? Claire asked, her tone deliberately light despite the weight of the question. Callan turned to her, truly seeing her this brilliant, straightforward woman who had walked into his life with no agenda beyond genuine connection. The beginning of a new one, he said. If you're interested. Her smile was answer enough. Later that night, as they shared a nightcap at his apartment, Callan's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at it, then set it aside. Something important? Claire asked. No, Callan replied truthfully. Just a legal notice. Sebastian Crowley has been disbarred. Your ex-wife's attorney, among other things. Callan didn't elaborate, and Claire didn't press. After she left, promising to call the next day, Callan returned to his phone, reading the article in full. Sebastian's ethical violations have been deemed egregious and systematic, his disbarment immediate and permanent. The article mentioned Lena only in passing, as one of several clients whose cases have been compromised by Sebastian's misconduct. Callan closed the article without feeling the satisfaction he'd once anticipated. The victory seemed hollow now, unnecessary even. Sebastian and Lena had engineered their own downfalls without his assistance, their flaws and weaknesses exposed by simple consequences rather than elaborate revenge. He moved to his window, a habit he'd developed over the past year. These moments of quiet reflection while overlooking the city. Tonight, the view seemed especially clear. The urban landscape spread before him like a map of possibilities. What had Harlow asked him months ago in his office? What would fill the void left by his quest for justice? Now he had an answer. Not revenge, not vindication, but simply life. His company, thriving under renewed focus. The foundation, transformed from a vanity project to a force for meaningful change. And perhaps, with Claire, a relationship built on honesty and mutual respect rather than illusion. The story of Callan and Lena Week had reached its final chapter. She had gambled everything and lost. He had defended what was his and prevailed. And if there was a last laugh to be had, it wasn't found in Lena's downfall or Sebastian's disgrace. It was in the simple fact that Callan Week had emerged from the crucible not broken, but reforged. Stronger, wiser. Freed, he turned from the window and prepared for bed, tomorrow's schedule already taking shape in his mind. Board meeting at 9. Lunch with the development team. Dinner with Claire at that new restaurant downtown. Life continuing, moving forward rather than circling back. And in that forward motion was the truest victory of all.